responsibility to fulfill the demands and the duties incumbent upon us as citizens. Times have changed for the better, and you mentioned how Gustavus was a campus upon which the V12 program existed. And I will say in my time, from the 1980s to today, the college reception of veterans and active service members has changed and changed for the better, and for that I am glad. I hope that our veterans and our active service members at Gustavus feel the warmth, the welcome, the support, and the love that I know that faculty, staff, and students feel for all of you. I want you to know that we stand alongside you. Because you've dedicated yourself to principles we espouse and rights we cherish, we stand alongside you. Because you've accepted without complaint the risks and the challenges that few will face, we stand alongside you. Because you've set aside self-interest and the comforts of home to serve others, we stand alongside you. Because you brought hope to the oppressed, to the frightened, and to those yearning for democracy and for safety, we stand alongside you. May God bless all of America's veterans, all of our active service members and their families, and all those from Gustavus who have served and who will serve. We thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry. And I have to say, I never thought about the risk that the Merchant Marines took, because we kind of took it for granted every time we fueled and collected or got stores, the things that they go through, because nobody ever considers them as veterans, so to speak, or military members. Our final speaker this evening is the president of Gustavus Adolphus College Student Veterans. He is a sophomore student, served in the United States Army's 10th Mountain Division for 5.5 years, including combat deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce Ryan Eiler Hendrickson.
I was afraid of losing my speech, so I hid it in the podium. Thank you, Representative Morrow, for your remarks this evening. Distinguished guests, my fellow veterans, ladies and gentlemen of the student body, good evening. It's a privilege to speak before you during this most auspicious occasion and in this great hall. For the past few weeks, I've been perusing Veterans Day speeches delivered by famous individuals like President John F. Kennedy and Secretary of State Colin Powell in order to find my own inspiration. Unfortunately, I didn't quite find what I was looking for. I finally turned to a speech delivered by General of the Army Douglas MacArthur to the Corps of Cadets at West Point in the spring of 1962. This speech would become perhaps his most famous because MacArthur was well into his twilight years, and it came to be his symbolic farewell speech to the United States Army. In it, he stressed his belief in and reliance upon the West Point credo of duty, honor, country. As General MacArthur took to the podium in West Point's mess hall that morning nearly 50 years ago, he did so having an additional 50 years of operational experience as a commissioned officer in the United States Army and having served in every conflict in which the United States was engaged, from the occupation of the Philippines in 1903 until his relief of command during the Korean War in April 1951. He had served as a special advisor to every president from Herbert Hoover to John F. Kennedy and was respected as an elder statesman domestically. The motto MacArthur repeated throughout his speech to the Corps of Cadets, duty, honor, country, was his personal philosophy. It had driven him to succeed just as much when he was a young, promising lieutenant as when he was an old, retired general. He sought to instill in his young audience his personal definition of selflessness. But General Douglas MacArthur wasn't the only person under whom this personal banner flew. It isn't even solely that of those students and alumni of West Point. Indeed, it forms the core of beliefs by which all service members carry themselves to this day. What isn't directly mentioned in this motto is the principle of service. In veterans shorthand, we often say, "I was in the service." We describe our veterans as having served. It is this service to a grateful nation that we must cherish, for surely our veterans best represent the selflessness, determination, and courage of the American spirit. For the majority of our history, our veterans have been celebrated, but I'd like to take a few moments to illustrate a point of considerable exception. When our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines returned home from the Vietnam War, they were turned into a scapegoat for an anti-war movement so loudly entrenched in society that it seemed to forget its own aim at times. Our troops were spit upon in airports across the nation, and their hard-earned ribbons and other decorations were torn from their uniforms and thrown to the ground. Their sacrifices were not often mentioned. Their post-service plights, poverty, homelessness, and drug addiction were rarely addressed. And even veterans from previous wars looked down upon them as, to borrow a quote, not having served in a real war. But why did this happen? Was their service not enough? Did they not give their every ounce of blood, sweat, and tears during their time spent embroiled in brutal firefights from the demilitarized zone to the Mekong Delta? Surely this is not the case. They wore green as our soldiers today wear digitized green and gray. They looked out for their buddies during deployments as our troops continue to do today, and they mourned the loss of their fellow service members in much the same way. They returned home with post-traumatic stress disorder, much the same as we do today, and suffered from horrible afflictions for years after their service had ended. Before my grandfather passed away a year ago this month, his doctors at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Minneapolis informed us that his specific type of leukemia is commonly attributed to exposure to Agent Orange, a powerful defoliant used in the jungles of Vietnam. I've heard countless stories reflective of this same issue. Many of our fighting men and women returned to the United States in one piece, but it would not be incorrect to say that they died of injuries sustained in Vietnam. The veterans of that conflict suffered, and often continue to suffer, because of their mistreatment by their government and their countrymen some years ago. The situations faced by our current generation of service members returning from war greatly reflects a shift in national understanding and focus. Today, our veterans return home to airports filled with thankful applause. Our Veterans Affairs Administration provides world-class care to its patients, not solely to heal their physical wounds, but their emotional and spiritual ones as well. Our federal government has instituted sweeping programs aimed at ensuring that veterans receive a quality college education at little to no cost. Support for reintegration and jobs training, and jobs themselves, through tax incentives for small businesses. But this shift proves something about the indomitable American dedication to service. For many of the same veterans who returned home from Vietnam and were chastised and left unsupported and even homeless, managed to pick themselves up by their bootstraps by the late 1980s and chose to make a great change for their fellow veterans. They stated in no small measure, "Never again shall we allow this to happen to our returning veterans." And rather than withdraw from society, elected to change this broken socio-political system from within. The Vietnam generation's compassion for their fellow human beings defies description, and is certainly worthy of our greatest gratitude. Even after all they'd been through, they still managed to answer President Kennedy's call to ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. This Veterans Day, my thoughts are with them, and so too are my thanks. The August 29, 2011 edition of Time magazine features a photograph of 5 veterans who've served in Afghanistan and Iraq since 2001. The article chronicling their return to the United States and their continued service to their fellow veterans and their communities is entitled "The New Greatest Generation." Today, our veterans are returning home in droves. Many of them continue to enjoy their career paths in the military, but many also choose to retire their uniforms and tools of war and take up in their stead textbooks, pens, and paper. They take up construction tools and the steering wheels of semi-trucks, and they take up guitars and blogs. We're a diverse lot, and we have to stay busy. Perhaps this is why we've been likened to the generation that returned home from World War II. We like to get things done, and if you're impeding our progress in a given field, we'll be sure to politely let you know. Many of us don't like to stand out, but as Danny pointed out, there aren't many of us here on campus. Given Gustavus's comparatively small class sizes, it's safe to say that if you've taken a class with a veteran, you've met them, and you know that they've served. And if any of you have taken a class with me, you most certainly know. But I tell you because I want you to know about some people with whom I've had the pleasure to serve in war. and whom I call some of my best friends. Many of them are prosperous in their own lives, but a few of them are no longer among the living. They gave their all in service to our nation and gallantly laid down their lives for their brethren. I find myself thinking about them whenever I struggle, because I know that things could be much worse. And I think about them when I succeed, because I know that's what they want me to do. About some of them, I realize that I'm living the dream they were never able to fulfill. Their lives were cut short before they could attend college or have a family. And their sacrifices should never be forgotten. They were servants. They are my heroes. They remind us that our desires must be to serve those around us, to accomplish in no short order the great good that has eluded humanity since its inception. They remind us that we must look beyond paltry identifying characteristics like class, creed, skin color, and concentrate our efforts on ensuring that a new great American dream, one of endless prosperity, is achieved. Accordingly, they remind us that we must ensure temperate use of our own mighty strength. And finally, they remind us that we must instill in our posterity the value of a strong work ethic, as well as the value of service to one another in our nation. This is what I take from their sacrifice. I hope that after this evening's ceremony, you will take some time over the next few days to think about your relatives, friends, and acquaintances who currently serve or who have served in the armed forces of the United States. Though Veterans Day comes but once a year, I hope that you will always remember our service members and veterans for their selfless service and hold them near and dear to your hearts. The next time you see a veteran, ask to shake his or her hand and tell them, thank you. It's a decision you'll never regret. I'll leave you tonight with a quote by George Washington. In 1789, he said, "The willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in any war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional as to how they perceive the veterans of earlier wars were treated and appreciated by their country." It has been a great honor to speak before you on this Veterans Day, and a memory which I will always cherish. Thank you.
At this time, tonight's speakers and I would like to field any questions or comments you might have. So, I open the floor. If you have any questions, why we do what we do, why we did what we did, and our experiences and such, if you have any questions, there's pretty much nothing that I won't answer for the most part. So if you want, Ryan, you want to join me up here?
Gotta ask him the dirty stuff.
We're among friends, so you can ask anything.
Very good.
Well, maybe I'll expand a little bit about what it meant for me or why I chose the path I chose. Graduating high school, I never ever considered a lot of the options available to me. I never considered college even for a minute. I left it as a son of a blue-collar worker, looking to become a blue-collar worker myself. I saw nothing wrong with that. Of course, you get into a position where you struggle financially, and you're like, well, why did I choose this path? What's going on? And I remember spending Thanksgiving with my uncle, and he asked me, well, when's the Navy recruiter coming to your house? And I said, whenever you call him. And in that moment when he said that, and I responded in that manner, I started thinking about the likelihood of me actually going through with this. And you know, you get a little scaredy pants, and you wonder if what you're about to do or consider is really the right choice for you. And a lot of times when you're in the military, you wonder if the decision you made is the right one. But I thought about my grandfather, and he passed in '87, and I barely got to know him. But he served in the Navy. He served from 1943 to 1946 aboard the USS John A. Bull, based out of Brooklyn Navy Yard in New York City. And reading some of the letters after my grandmother passed, when I joined, I kind of got to see a bit of a man that I started to learn to know about just by being at sea, living that life. And he wrote a letter to my grandmother, and the very end of it said, "I hope none of my sons or their sons ever have to do what I've done." And none of us saw that letter until my grandmother passed. It was kind of odd, because you never, if we had seen that letter, would we have done what we did? His son, my Uncle Paul, joined the Navy, served aboard the USS Arnold J. Isbell, which was commissioned at the same time my grandfather's ship was commissioned, and he served in Vietnam. And my cousin joined when I was a kid, and he flew in helicopters, and I was lucky enough to serve with him aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt. My first deployment, I got to spend time with my cousin and kind of learn who he was, because he was gone most of my younger life. So at first you think it's all about just going, I'm going to go get college stuff, and a lot of it is self-discovery. You join, you grow up, and you learn experiences that, you know, for many probably get annoyed by because you're in class and you raise your hand and you're like, well, when I was in the Navy, or well, when I was in the Army, this is how it was. And it's hard not to relate that, because that's the biggest chunk of your life. It's the most developmental part of my becoming an adult. So I questioned why I served initially, but now I'll never forget. It's about the family and the friends and the brotherhood that I will never, ever, ever forget. They'll be there for the rest of my life, and hopefully I'll be there for theirs. If there are no questions, this will conclude the ceremony for tonight. So I thank you for coming. We expected about this, and we hope to, for the future, bring your friends, bring your family, because everybody knows a veteran. It's somebody's brother, somebody's uncle, somebody's grandfather, son, daughter. And it's hard, it's almost shameful to forget them. And Memorial Day is a day when we can remember those that have passed, but today is a day to remember those that are alive with us, and we shouldn't take that for granted. So thank you. I appreciate you being here.